Welcome to Autism Weekly, the podcast that discusses autism news, current events, and inclusion. Each week, we welcome a guest to the program to share their unique perspective and expertise as it relates to the fascinating world of autism. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. I'm the founder and president at ABS. I've been in the field of autism and applied behavior analysis as a clinician and advocate for nearly 2 decades. A behavior analyst in the autism field must balance technical skills and data analysis with a compassionate partnership with families. Creating an environment where the family and patient feel heard is so important to create trust and ultimately effective care. So how do you teach compassion, active listening, and effective communication to behavior analysts and technicians? Well, this week we welcome Christina Tenerielloto to the podcast to discuss the importance of compassion in ABA and autism services and how to go about doing that. Christina is a board-certified behavior analyst based out of the Inland Empire region of California. She's passionate about the development of inclusive environments in education and the workplace, as well as making sure families are set up for success. Christina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I'm so glad that you can come on and talk about this issue because there is a lot of talk, and I would say oftentimes misinformation in the field about ABA not having a personal side to it. And I would argue that might be bad ABA lacking that interpersonal connection. But before we get there, can you just tell me about how you fell into the field of autism services? And do you have a personal connection? Do you have a raison d'etre to be a clinician?
Actually, so I started working with students with disabilities since I was 16 years old. So I always loved the advocacy work that came with this. But when I worked in a group home during my undergraduate time, I had met a BCBA. That was my first introduction kind of into the field. So started working for an agency. And from the time that I had done some work in high school and the advocacy work with disabled individuals, just seeing that personal side to families, I was always very connected to and always really enjoyed that piece as well. So
it sounds like having the chance to almost as a late adolescent to already start getting your feet wet and understanding who it is that receives services or what the lifestyle is of a family when they're trying to juggle so much information all the time, and how to empower those that were in the group home. That probably created so much perspective for you. So how do you see the world of autism and the abilities that could be coming from somebody who identifies as autistic?
I think that the past 10 years, I've seen the world of autism evolve. Like when I kind of first started, it was more working with individuals, for lack of a better word, with that were more significantly impacted.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen more of the evolution of the autism community within the past 10 to 15 years. So that's actually been really fascinating and really cool to see that whole evolution of really truly the spectrum really kind of form, and meeting more and more individuals who are neurodivergent and then have a place within this world. So I love that aspect, definitely.
Yeah, and with the diagnostics within autism is that it isn't just that first child you were describing that is so profoundly impacted by some of the limitations that autism might provide.
Mm-hmm.
What you see now is such a broad scope where you have a very, very diverse set of people, some with wonderful skills that are able to help teach you and I about the world around us on a regular basis because they have a perspective that we have not understood.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the part that I really want to get into today, because that's where the compassion really has to shine through, is that we took a science and now it's a practice of therapy. And So what has been one of those challenges that you've seen with clinicians making that jump of taking a purely data-driven field and turning it into one where empathy is important?
Well, I think it's really been within my own practice of really focusing on how I'm going to focus more on my perspective taking and interpersonal skills, but also really kind of I feel like the reform movement that's happening within the field right now of more and more. First of all, more and more neurodivergent BCBAs are working in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole perspective has been so profound for me to listen to, as an advocate and really an ally for individuals with disabilities. So definitely hearing more neurodivergent voices, particularly within applied behavior analysis, really listening to them and taking in their advice and how we can expand this field and really make reform happen within the field. That's really been the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the word listening there, and it was on repeat, and there's a good reason for that, I'm sure, because in order to be compassionate and to understand, the first thing that you have to do is listen. And I would imagine that could be listening to your patient who might be a child, or it could be an adult patient, or it could be listening to the family, listening to the community, listening to the broader community of those who are neurodiverse and understanding all of that. So with that listening kind of the key and at the forefront of everything, what is practicing compassionate ABA?
Well, I'm going to steal from Linda LeBlanc and Bridget Taylor and I believe Melissa Nosik. I think I might have just butchered her last name. They wrote a fantastic article really about compassion, practicing compassion within the field. And they really, I loved their definition, which was really taking your interpersonal skills and balancing your technical skills. And I feel like, first of all, practicing compassion is just a balance in general, right? But if you look at practicing compassionate ABA, it truly is taking the perspective, taking the interpersonal skills, the relationship building, and balancing it all with the science of applied behavior analysis. I think the most important thing is the perspective taking of the family. I think that really when you work in the home, you really see what families are living every single day. You're there for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, but this is their life completely. Understanding what families are going through, that is the most important piece before you come in really with the science.
Yeah, and I think that you hit on it, is that interpersonal ability to build the trust to really get in deep and understand what it is, what's driving, where's the passion of the family, what are the most important things for them. So could you paint this picture for us? Is that, what is it right now for a family of a child with autism? What is it that family is going through? I would imagine just understanding there's something different as a parent. There's red flags, like that makes me nervous. Getting a diagnosis, now I'm even more nervous. Having somebody in my house for 30 hours. Can you paint that picture? Can you tell me what that's like for your families?
Well, I'll paint one particular picture with a family that I worked with several years ago. I worked with their son who was significantly impacted. And for them, it was, he had a younger sister and his father was going to school full time. Mother was staying at home, not because she wanted to, but because she had to, right? Because childcare is an issue and schooling is an issue, and really seeing just the day-to-day life for them, that like going to the grocery store to go grocery shopping isn't, it's a thing, right? Planning family vacations, it's a thing. It's really taking, I think being a parent is stressful enough, period, with a typical developing child. I have a young daughter. I've really kind of seen this, that it's hard being a parent, truly is one of the hardest things in the world. But add on top of societal pressure, feeling like you're being judged because your child might be different. Childcare, who's going to watch your child? You can't necessarily just trust anybody. And then trying to make a better life as a parent for your family, and how that's a lot harder too. And so just really seeing that perspective, it changed a lot for me, because I really saw that it's not easy, just for his mother to like go get a job, because it's like, well, who's going to watch their son? Or for the sister who was typical developing, it's hard, because I think we don't really talk a lot about siblings and what they experience having a sibling who is autistic or disabled. And so really just seeing that dynamic, but then at the heart of it, it's truly one of the best families in the world. Like, there's a spirit within the families as well that I just feel like can't be overstated of how amazing that is,
Yeah. And I've heard that so many times, is that having a child who maybe makes you kind of think outside the box, or has a perspective that's slightly different, or skills that are different.
Yes.
It actually, it makes your life more enriched and more enjoyable over time, but it's getting to that point. And I guess that's where my questions would then start leading to, and is, we know in a lot of the research with autism is that especially for those impacted pretty severely, is that the best prognosis is getting consistency, is getting intensive service, is getting that continuity of care. But at the same time, is that growth and catching up to that peer set is not a fast process. It's slow. So how do you reassure a parent? How do you demonstrate that compassion with still trying to help support best case kind of prognosis for quickest treatment? And how does that balancing act work?
I mean, I think that I'm a little different in the sense of maybe other BCBAs, where I'm not really I want to look at what the priorities are for the family. What's your priority? What can we work for? What can we work on? Of course, we have a curriculum that kind of drives intervention. But I really, it's almost like, what good is implementing certain goals if it's not meaningful to the family and to the patient, right? So I really look more towards what's meaningful for you and for the child, patient, adolescent, whoever it may be, and starting there. And I think sometimes when we focus on like timelines and all of those things, I think we get lost within the meaningfulness of intervention and therapy. So I try and really stick more towards that when I'm working with families, is what's meaningful for you and how can we accomplish this? And really using more of the that motivational piece of like, if it's meaningful for you, I want to help you. How can I help you? Aspect of where I'm coming from versus more of like, and I'm not saying all BCBAs do this, but instead of so much focusing on like, oh, well, we need to be consistent and we need to meet this and this and this, and data shows, and it's more about how can I help you and how is this going to be meaningful within session? Because if parents feel burnout or fatigue, they're not going to continue. So I think sometimes if we pivot the conversation more of that way of what's meaningful and what you want the outcomes to be, then I think that kind of helps with the fatigue, because intervention can be a fatigue sometimes for families,
Is it fair to say that some of the flexibility of a good ABA program, kind of making it more naturalized and utilizing the understanding of the ecology of the family and their values, their importance, and making sure the goals match, is that there's ways to integrate treatment so that treatment doesn't really feel like it's ongoing, both for the family and for the child all the time?
Yeah, I feel like you put that very eloquently, that yes, I feel like that's really adopting more of that cultural competency within the family that you're working with as well. And yes, I'm a big proponent of that. That is really what's going to drive your outcomes to be more meaningful and effective, in my opinion. Not everyone always agrees with that. But definitely with the families I've worked with in the past, that's the angle that I take it. And I feel like the field is moving more in that cultural competency and being flexible within treatment and understanding the family's needs.
Yeah, and I would imagine that the trust factor is so important there, is that if somebody is listening to me, somebody is hearing what's important to me, and they're tailoring their treatment in a way where I feel valued, well, guess what I might end up doing is I might be more bought into the treatment plan. Is that what you've seen historically? Have you seen that with families?
Most definitely. Even with myself, if I go find a personal trainer and they're listening to me and they care about me and they don't harp on me because maybe I had too many tacos or I missed a workout, but they're listening to me, I'm more willing to show up for my sessions, right? I have no doubt that it's the same with the families. And so the best is when they're happy and excited you're there, right? So when they see you and the families that never cancel, right? Too. That's the other piece as well. It's just you want to make session where they're happy and so excited to see you. Not just the patient, but the family as well. I know we talk a little bit about the blurred lines, but as far as like who you are when you're in the home, but it's hard because sometimes parents do feel like you are part of the family. You work with their child that not a lot of people will work with, or they hear a lot of words like deficits and, severe problem behavior. And that's constantly being thrown at them. And so when you come in as a clinician and you're excited and you care for the well-being of their child, they're going to adopt you like you're their family member, no matter what you can say as far as relationships and all of those things go. But yeah.
So what does, the deviation from, hey, this is my perfect goal set, this is exactly what I want my treatment session always to look like. What is the deviation of being able to bring the family in? What does that do to the outcome of the service? The willingness to maybe shift priorities, shift goals for the family's sake. What does that do for the overall outcome, in your opinion?
I think everything is worth a conversation with families as to why they feel like what's working and what's not working, what their apprehensions are. Because it goes back to listening. Parents want to be heard, patients that we work with want to be heard. And I look at our service as that. It's a service. Like I am there to serve the client. And so if I don't listen, then it's not about my therapy. It's about how I'm best serving the client.
Yeah. And with a service that relies on longevity, it's not I'm going in and tomorrow or next week, I've already accomplished every goal. This is oftentimes for children, it's months, years long treatment, is that you can burn a bridge by being so rigid that maybe you can't get back, where it's saying and understanding when do you give a little to be able to make up room on the back end, because now the trust is there. So if you have a challenging skill, challenging behavior where you have to say, no, we need to go this route or else we're in trouble.
Most definitely.
Is that the family listens better.
Most definitely. And I think that also, a lot of the reform in applied behavior analysis is talking about that, the rigidity is not where we should be going. It really should be, because at the end of the day, that yes, this is a science that transformed into an intervention, but it's therapy. And so we're there to be at a service for our families. And I think that disagreeing in a professional way is okay, but I look at it as we can always meet in the middle, no matter what.
Yeah. And so, we've heard, like, obviously this helps with the client relationship. This helps with the overall outcome for the patient that you're working with and that child. It helps with their prognosis, for them being able to be as independent as we're trying to be able to create opportunities and really help with their development. What does this do for that clinician who's actually practicing the skill of compassion?
Yeah, I think that I think that this is one that I'm particularly even more interested in is really disseminating this compassionate ABA to fellow clinicians, right? There's a BCBA, her name's Dr. Megan Miller. She's really part of the Do Better Collective, and she talks a lot about this, is that we're not really taught within our coursework this compassionate practice, right? And a lot of up and coming clinicians might not be parents. So it's really hard to kind of bridge that gap. So I think that, first of all, it should be taught in our coursework. If I could change the coursework, I would advocate for that. But I think the science needs to start changing the lens of taking more of a perspective taking, because at the end of the day, we're still working with people. And so it's not, pigeons pecking for food, right?
Yep.
And so I think that that's really more of the movement we need to go. Dr. Amanda Kelly, she's known as Behavior Babe. I read a fantastic quote by her where she said, we need to do better. We need to do a better job at teaching therapists to think like parents instead of training parents to act like therapists. And I was really moved by that quote, because I think that if I could say, talk about clinicians taking more of a compassionate ABA approach, I would just show them that quote and say, that's what that means.
Yeah. So it is interesting. I mean, you've talked about the coursework not really handling it. And I think that I'm blessed to be at a clinical site where we have psychologists. So we have people with that training that can share that and push it down so that others have the opportunity to learn. But I guess that the question would come in is that you have field like pediatrics, where even understanding autism was not really part of a general peds process. So they made that mandatory in their medical training. Is that the route, or are there other vehicles to get this teaching out there?
Most definitely. I think there's several roads you can take to this, whether it's definitely embedding it into the coursework for future clinicians. I think if it's agencies as well taking that role on, I think that the board is trying to take that role on by addressing cultural competency, and saying and changing some of the codes within the ethics code. I think that that the board is moving in that direction, because I probably sound like a broken record, but reform is happening, Mm-hmm. And so I think that is, that it's going to happen. It's going to go there for sure. But I think that for people who are already BCBAs now, it's doing their due diligence as well, and taking more continuing education units on being a compassionate and curious behavior analyst. Yeah. I think that we're kind of trained and conditioned in the process to, put your BCBA hat on, you're a scientist. But I still say at the end of the day, you're still working with individuals who are impacted no matter what. Mm-hmm. So you can't just take, the emotion out of your practice. And I don't want to, that's where I'm at too, of saying, I don't want to not be compassionate. I don't want to be black and white, because I do believe so much is in the gray.
Mm-hmm. And the way you're describing ABA right now would be the way that I would be looking at, this is good ABA. You're taking and you're personalizing your treatment and understanding. And whether that's cultural awareness, whether that's understanding the ecology, whether that's just being able to take a step back and understanding the perspective of somebody who's experiencing the events, that's, to me, good ABA. So if we're in this bubble right now, and historically, maybe it wasn't always good ABA that was out there, is how do you battle that misinformation? Because you'll have people out there saying, well, ABA is this, and in your heart, no, I do ABA. I know what it should look like. So how do you battle that misinformation?
I think if you asked me that question a couple of years ago, my answer would have been oh, I say all sciences have skeletons in their closet, right? But now that you're asking me this now, and I say I listen to what concerns anyone who is bringing to me about ABA. And yes, I know it's misinformation, but maybe some of it is based in not great ABA. You know, I've worked with families, one in particular who didn't have a great experience. And so that was forever in her mind of what ABA is, right? But all I can say to that is science is progressive. It always evolves. That's why it's a science. So when I listen to parents or individuals who are seeking treatment, I think listening is important. Say, I hear you. I'm sorry if that happened to you. I want to do better. How can I help you?
And to go back to your initial point from previously, is that the education and training that we're delivering is so vital, is that an experience is what somebody felt. It's what they went through. So if we are not focused on giving and empowering clinicians to do it the right way, then it's gonna continue to kind of live through this cycle of, no, well, I got good clinicians, bad clinicians, some trained, not trained. Is that there's got to be consistency in how we're approaching it as well. And I think that we're on the same page as far as, well, it's hard to stand up something unless you're doing the work to make sure that everybody has the skill set to do it.
And I think that's a perfect way to describe it, right? Is that saying that I want to do better. I don't want to perpetuate that stereotype or continue that type of misinformation. Mm-hmm. And really, I've kind of been taking more of like the quote bad ABA out of my language, and really just kind of saying, this is what applied behavior analysis is, and this is and this is what it can help you do. And it really goes down to that it's the science of behavior. That's what it is. I mean, I love that ABA is stretching to, acceptance and commitment therapy, and really working more in, different profiles of individuals. And so I think that just, and it shows its power of that it's truly a science of behavior on every, scale. So it's been wonderful to kind of really show that as well, that when misinformation is brought to me or concerns have been brought to me, of really showing the evolution and the progression of the science. Yeah. And, I think it's really important to kind of say that we are a very young field. And so that has been in the most giving that type of information delicately as possible, of like, we're extremely young science, when you compare us to psychology or philosophy, I mean, the years aren't there. So I think that kind of helps to really, really show more of the evolution of the science as well, that because we're so young and how fast we've grown, that kind of helps ease the anxiety of people who have brought concerns or misinformation to me when it comes to applied behavior analysis.
Yeah, and ABA can be such a powerful vehicle for a lot of people and being able to achieve their goals. And it's a service that, when done right, can really open up a lot of doors. But the families need to advocate for themselves as well, I think. And so how do you coach a family? How do you talk with a family to make sure that they're getting the compassionate care that they deserve through the process? Are there words of advice that you'd be giving to a family to make sure that they feel empowered?
Well, I think that I probably would use more of the, it's funny that I'm saying more of like the psychologist approach of how does that make you feel, right? You reframe the question back to them. Because I think that when you're listening to families and you're validating their concerns and what's meaningful for them and what outcomes they want, and reframing it back to them, it's almost like they come to their own conclusion. I think that when you're working with the family, they want help. They want you there. So I think the validation is so important, and reframing what they're already saying back to them, so that they're heard. So there's not necessarily a particular script that I would use, because I feel like it's so much more organic when I'm talking to a family, because every family's their outcome of treatment and what they want is individualized to them and the patient.
Yeah. But I would imagine that there's a level of self-empowerment, or a level of giving the family the right to have self-compassion
100%.
that's so important in this treatment process, that, no family should ever feel like they can't have a voice in treatment, and that they need to advocate for that at the same time. So if they're running into this with a clinician, you don't have to put up the wall. You don't have to say or feel like you have to follow blindly. It's have that dialogue, share that feeling, that perspective, because that's going to create a better treatment environment.
Absolutely. And I think that when you're, regularly checking in with families, and you're talking to them about how session went, how they're feeling, what, how their weekend was, even like, did you go to the grocery store? How was that kind of a thing? I think that that's you're already fostering that communication piece.
Mm-hmm.
I think that talking to families, though, and I've had families tell me where they've gotten stuck of like, yeah, this happened. We went to the grocery store and I totally gave in. And it's valid. It's okay. Like, it's okay. Hey, you didn't want a scene at the grocery store. I get it. You bought the candy bar. It's not a big deal. I just had I work at a school district as well. And I just had a parent email me the first day of school, and she said, "Oh, Christina, it was a failure. We only made it to the office, and she didn't get into the classroom. But she didn't hurt herself. She didn't hurt anybody else." And I said, It wasn't a failure. That was a success. You got to the office. Great job. We engaged in no self-interest behavior, no aggression towards staff, no aggression towards you. That wasn't a failure. You went home. Like, you trusted your mom gut and you went home. And I think that we don't really have that type of language a lot of times with parents, of saying like, no, you did what you felt was right at that moment, and that's okay. And I still stand on, you don't always need to follow through. If it doesn't feel right, you say, okay, I'm going to stop right now. Because I think that sometimes or let me reframe this. We need to empower parents more of, they know what is best, and we're there to just guide. That's all, And so validating that mom, I think it was helpful, because she emailed back immediately and said, "Thank you." I feel so much better hearing that. And then the next day, her daughter walked into class. So it's just because she felt empowered enough to say, okay, let's try it again. And that's what it's all about.
And it's relieving to know that we're all fallible, and it's important to celebrate those super small successes when they do occur, so that we know that I'm capable. Maybe not all the time, because I'm not perfect, but I'm capable, and I need to cut myself some slack occasionally as well.
And I do feel like that's what ABA intervention truly capitalizes on, is small successes. We break down a behavior and we build it slowly, one piece at a time. And that's what I love about this science, is that what other therapy or intervention does that, right? We take small steps, and we're true masters of shaping. And so really that's what it's all about, of just taking, this is my goal. This is how we're going to get there, little by little. And sometimes we fall backwards, and that's okay, because we keep trying. And I feel like if I could sum up ABA, that's truly, to me, like what it's all about when we're working in intervention and treatment.
Yeah. And I appreciate everything that you've been able to share, because I know that you've taken out of your vernacular bad ABA. But what I will say is that what you're describing in compassionate ABA is good ABA. So we can keep the good part in there. Right. We can take the bad out. And I think that we're on the same page. But tell me, Christina, is that I know that you have an Instagram site, and I know that you are involved with a nonprofit. Can you tell me a little bit about that work that you're doing?
Yes. So I am involved in a nonprofit called Leap Institute. And we're really geared more towards we provide various things. But right now we're really focusing on supervision scholarships for up and coming young clinicians, and really focusing more on this compassionate approach. So we offer supervision scholarships to young people who are clinicians in general who are seeking their supervision hours. As a fellow BCBA, I'm sure you know that getting supervision is not easy. It's quite a skill. It's not the easiest thing to go and get. So we provide, we have small cohorts. We provide supervision for free. And so we really target, BIPOC, non-BIPOC, LGBTQ plus individuals to create more of a diverse practice of applied behavior analysis. Because I think that that's also something that the board is trying to address, is the diversity issue. We know that we work with a diverse population of families, so clinicians should be just as diverse. So that's what we do at Leap Institute. We provide supervision scholarships, and we're actually going to start providing mentorship to fellow BCBAs as well. And the mentorship isn't a supervision relationship. It's you and I talking about a particular case that we're struggling with or needing to hear about. Mentorship is huge. My former supervisor who works at ABS I consider him now my mentor, and so that's really what we focus on, and it's really focusing on how to be a compassionate, diverse BCBA.
Well, I appreciate all that you're doing there, and it's helping the field, but ultimately it's going to help the recipients of care. So all that effort that you're putting in there, and I do also thank you for sharing your passion today, because it's having that voice and sharing that energy that's going to get other people excited about learning about and doing the same steps to educate themselves. So thank you so much, Christina, for coming on and chatting with us today. And we hope to have you back sometime soon as well, because it sounds like you have so much to offer.
Most definitely. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all of the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS. ABS is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids, that's plural.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.